I get a special little tingle inside when I check my email and I see a subject line that simply reads, "Rip this a new asshole, please." I got just such an email from astute listener Eric this week. It had a link to an article on the Huffington Post, and I made it about 7 words into the headline before I sent my reply. I just said, "Eric, consider it multi-anist." I actually got this one from several listeners, so you might have seen it, but if not, brace yourself for this bullshit headline, okay? New religion and science study reveals, note by the way, those are the first 6 words. This is the peak of the article. It will never get this good again, so savor this moment before I finish. Okay, so new religion and science study reveals post-secular rejection of evolution. That's right, post-secular. It's come and gone, folks. Secular was fun while it lasted. So here's the kumbaya, coexist cleverly depicted in religious symbols thrust of this thing. It's a sociological paper essentially trying to make the argument that we're not seeing a conflict in which science is overtaking its antiquated precursor. No. There's actually a happy, hippie middle ground between religion and rational, a space that they call post-secular in hopes of downplaying the fact that religion is an archaic worldview that is in all ways inferior to empirical observation. They're challenging the traditional view that religion is in conflict with science, and their evidence is that some religious people know how lasers work. This is basically just a verbose rewording of the tired trope that says, "Don't worry, religious people, you can play too." Now, follow me through their logic here, but be sure to limber up first. Asking you to follow this logic is like asking you to look me in the eye rectally. They examined some existing survey data about religion and science, and they identified 4 groups. Moderns, which are people whose worldview is informed by science, that's us. Traditionals, whose worldviews are informed by religion. Postmoderns, whose worldview is, let's face it, not informed at all. And then what they call post-seculars, which are people whose worldview, so they claim, is a hybridization of science and religion. Now, no doubt they coined this specific bullshit term in a desperate attempt to suggest that religion isn't pre-scientific, it's post-scientific. Science wasn't an improvement on the religious paradigm. They're just both equally valid and equally valuable, and both the Patriots and Seahawks should have got the same "we tried really hard" trophy in the end. So they point to the fact that 21% of the people in this country exhibit a higher than average knowledge and trust of science while still rejecting evolution, the Big Bang, and the age of the Earth. In other words, they know the science, they just reject it. And if you hear the authors of the study tell it, they understand science. They're scientifically minded. They just choose to reject certain scientific conclusions. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that if you think you get to reject certain scientific conclusions, you don't understand science. That's like saying they understand the English language, they just can't speak, read, or comprehend it. Science is not a list of facts. It's a method of determining the truth of a claim. It's the tool, not the product. And if you accept science, you have to take the bits you don't like with the ones that you do. But of course, these post-seculars are nothing new. It's just a new shade of lipstick on the same old pig. Some anti-scientific Christian zealots are able to hide from science and they just distrust it. But the other ones, the ones that this survey Christopher Columbus, are the ones that choose to insulate themselves against the scientific inaccuracies in their beliefs with well-crafted bullshit. So congratulations, guys. You've discovered Ken Ham. Sure, this demographic may say they trust science, but that's because they think that the shit that the Discovery Institute is doing is science. And yes, they answered correctly when you asked them what a laser was, but that's only because their religion doesn't have a vested interest in obfuscating that fact. I guarantee you that if Baptists decided tomorrow that the Bible said lasers were actually angel ejaculate, within a generation your survey results would look a hell of a lot different. Look, in some areas you can still hide from the science. You can still pretend that evolution didn't happen or that the Big Bang didn't happen. You can pretend that Noah's Ark was a real event, and you can get away with that day to day without seeing undeniable evidence to the contrary. Now, don't get me wrong. There is undeniable evidence to the contrary, but it's just not staring you in the face every day, all day. Now, on the other hand, you can't pretend that prayer works as well as medicine. You can't pretend that following Jesus works better than TomTom. You can't pretend that a blessing works better than a vaccine. Or you can't pretend that an exorcism works as well as Thorazine. And sure, there are some deluded, crazy fucks who've convinced themselves of all of these things, but when the shit hits the fan, it's only the crazy people that would pray instead of calling 911. So for 999,999,997 of the billion questions the average person has about the world, religion can't even pretend that they've got anything on science. On all of those questions, the religious person is allowed to answer correctly. So what this survey is really saying is, hey, look, we found 3 questions about which religious people are still able to successfully delude themselves. And regardless of what this study's authors might claim, that's exactly what they found. They didn't find people weighing each subject and choosing an answer by the merit of the evidence. They found a bunch of religious people rejecting all the parts of science that don't mesh with Jesus. They found religious people consistently rejecting the same questions. There is no post-secular. There's just pre-scientific with a smartphone. And sure, everybody can construct their own little way of viewing the world. They've got every right to look at the universe in any way they want. If you want to call all the squares circles, I can't stop you, but I can sure as hell tell you that you're wrong. Only one side gets to be correct. You can't build airplanes with postmodernism. You can't launch satellites with religion. You can't advance human knowledge with theology. Despite all this magnanimous hand-waving to the contrary, religion and science are in conflict. And if we don't want the future to suck, religion has to lose.